Okay, on to the second part of our tutorial, where we're going to use a bit of jQuery and AJAX to load this information into the page. So now you might be wondering here, why don't we simply use a PHP include? And that is a valid question, but what we found, if I go back to killersites.com, is we found that sometimes it takes a little while for this XML data to load. And in that case, what often happens is the browser renders up to here, and then it takes a couple seconds to display this information. And while that couple seconds is going on, any content below, this sidebar content, this footer content, all that wasn't being displayed. And we didn't want to have a delay on the page load any more than necessary. So what we decided to do was use a little bit of jQuery and AJAX to load this information after the page had fully loaded. So what we're going to be using is a jQuery function called .load, and specifically we're going to be doing this. We'll be having a div, and we're going to call .load on the div with a path to our PHP file. So let me open up our index.php and just add in some filler content. So here's the basics. I'm going to add killer sites as the title. Now within the body I'm going to have an h1 tag, which I'll call recent forum topics. And then within here we're going to have a div with ID, and we'll give it recent topics. Okay, so that's where our information is going to be loaded. And now within the head of the document, let's add there we go, and we're going to include the jQuery library. So that's going to link to this file. And then we also want to add a little bit of JavaScript. And we're going to place this JavaScript within the standard, what did I call it? I think .ready was my shortcut. There we go. The document.ready function. So as soon as the document is ready, it's going to perform these jQuery commands. And in this case, I'm going to go give it the recent topics div, and I'm going to go .load, and then we're going to load the getForum.php file. Okay, so let's take a look at this. There we go. So as soon as the page loads fully, then the information appears. So we also need to think of a couple other things that might enhance usability and accessibility for people, for example, who may have JavaScript disabled. So let's first think about what's going to happen if JavaScript is disabled. First off, obviously none of this will work. jQuery won't work, so all the user is going to see is a blank div. So instead of doing that, let's add in no script tags. And within these no script tags, let's add a link to that PHP file that we're loading. So just in case they can access the content if someone has disabled JavaScript. Okay, and then let's just put a few recent forum topics. Okay, so this way, if JavaScript is disabled for any reason, they can at least access the link and get the information that way. So they can just click on this, it'll load this, and they can see the information one way or another. Now let's see. Secondly, you'll notice there is a bit of a delay between the page loading and this section loading. And we probably want to have some sort of visual indication that something's going on. So what I've done is I have a loading.gif, and I created that at ajaxload.info. It's a little tool that you can use to generate a variety of animated GIFs. You can specify the kind, and then with the background color, including transparent background and foreground color of the item. So just as a quick example, I'll select this one. I'm going to have a transparent background color, and I'll just make it black is fine. So you click generate. It'll create this icon for you, and you just click download. So exactly which of these you use is up to your personal preference. But I have loading.gif, which looks like this. Just very simple. So let's go back. So we have this. Now, how do we do this? We want to have this loading indicator appear as long as this recent topics is empty. So we want to have it appear while the information is loading, and then obviously disappear once the information is fully loaded. So probably an easy way to do that is simply to add a class and give that class the background image. So let's do this. Put in style. And let's add a .loading class. And we'll give that a background. So that's going to point to my loading.gif. We're going to place it in top left, and we'll say that it's not going to repeat. And then the one other thing we want to do as well is let's give it a height and a width to make sure this background image appears. So it has a height of 11 pixels and a width of 16 pixels. So if you use a different image than just double check, make sure the dimensions are correct, that you're using the correct dimensions in the CSS. Okay, so that's the start of things. Obviously we're going to want to make sure that this background image only shows up if JavaScript is enabled. So what I'm going to do is within the jQuery block, I'm going to add, let me just copy this section actually. So I'm going to do .add class, and I'm going to add the loading class. Okay, so let's preview this and see how it works. So we got it, and it looks like it's sticking around. It continues to show up after the information is loading, but it looks generally good so far. So how are we going to go ahead and remove this class once the information is loaded? Well, if you go to the jQuery website, you'll notice that you can add a function that is called once this is complete. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add here, we just add a comma, function, and then let's call the function, let's do a remove class. So .remove class, and we'll remove the loading class. Okay, so let's preview and see how things work. So it looks like it's working perfectly. We have the animation shows up while it's loading and then disappears after it's finished loading. Well, that wraps up today's tutorial. Thanks for watching. You can contact me through my email address, ben@killersites.com, or through the Killer Sites forums where I go by the username Vulcan Creative. Thanks again.